Of course, another issue that obviously has affected some of the vote here in the UK, and we've seen, of course, campus protests in the US as well, is the issue of what's going on in the Middle East. To what degree do you think those sort of global political events are here to stay as a political influence in how people vote?
We certainly see them being important to voters across the board, but I think specifically in this case, we know that the issue of Labour's response to the conflict in Gaza was particularly important to British Muslim voters. I think what's interesting is that when we look at that kind of demographic of British Muslims, they tend to be quite economically left-wing, even if they are quite socially conservative in other ways in our survey. So we might expect that, if that issue isn't as important at the next election, they may be more likely to move back towards the Labour Party. Or they may, if it is still important, we may still see a shift towards other independent candidates, or maybe the Greens. I think what we find in our survey, which is quite interesting, is that amongst the white population in the UK, we tend to see that these kinds of social issues, as we will call them, so things that kind of aren't on those lines of tax and welfare and those kinds of economic questions, they tend to be very important to the way white voters vote. But we see that non-white voters are much more motivated by their economic preferences. And so I think it really depends on ultimately if an issue like Gaza and how important that's been in this election sets the tone for future elections. And we see that tilt towards social issues being more important.